Tanse, I'm Krista Nachkete. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Last November, the town of Ignis and Wabigoon Lake, Ojibwe First Nation in Ontario, agreed to house Canada's nuclear waste in an underground repository. Now, another community says they will be impacted by that repository, and they have decided to challenge the selection of the site area in court. First reported by the Canadian press, the Eagle Lake First Nation, located about 122 kilometers northwest of Ignis, has launched a federal court challenge against the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, or NWMO. Eagle Lake says they were unfairly excluded from the site selection process, and they allege unfairness in procedures and bad faith. Meanwhile, the NWMO says the site was chosen after an extensive study and community involvement. The legal challenge was filed in court on December 20th. Last November, Ignis and Wabigoon Lake agreed to move forward on the $26 billion repository. A First Nation in northwestern Ontario is warning its community of the dangers of human trafficking, and they are taking extra measures to protect their people. Terry Fobister is the emergency response coordinator for the Grassy Narrows First Nation, located about 90 kilometers northeast of Kenora. In a public notice posted to social media on New Year's Day, he said, quote, "Due to recent incidents involving attempted abductions of our band members, the Chief and Council have decided to reinstate a checkpoint to monitor those people entering and leaving our community. Human trafficking is vile and evil, and it has come to put our people at risk." APTN News has reached out to the First Nation for comment, but we haven't heard back yet. A new law that restricts the sale of long-bladed weapons, including machetes, is now in effect in Manitoba. The Long-Bladed Weapon Control Act, or Bill 39, requires retailers to securely store long-bladed weapons so shoppers can't access them without assistance. Purchasers must provide photo ID, retailers must keep sale records for 2 years, and selling to minors is prohibited. The province says the main goal is to keep long-bladed weapons out of the hands of youth. In early December, Manitoba Kiiwetinoong Obanuk Grand Chief Garrison Setti commended the bill. He said it would help address the violence in northern communities that involve machetes. The law officially came into effect last Tuesday. One story we will continue to follow this year is the ongoing issue of Jordan's Principle and the national backlog of 140,000 applications, with 20,000 of those cases marked as urgent. To talk more about this issue, we recently spoke with Cindy Blackstock, the Executive Director of the First Nations Caring Society, who speaks to us from Ottawa. Here's that interview. Cindy, thank you so much for chatting with us again, and Happy New Year to you. Last December, we heard from Jordan's Principle caseworkers in Manitoba, and they were told by Indigenous Services Canada that caseworkers should prepare for the worst and that significant cutbacks were going to happen and delays will be expected. Cindy, what do you make of this news going into 2025?
That's a really disappointing start to the new year. I mean, we're talking about First Nations children here, and Canada already has legal obligations to provide these services. It should be taking a fresh attitude and saying that, look, we're going to do better for First Nations children. We're going to comply with the orders and make sure their needs are met.
And Cindy, this comes at a time when Jordan's Principle applications are now backlogged by at least 140,000 applications. 20,000 of those are marked as urgent. What should Indigenous Services Canada be doing to address this quickly?
Well, number one, we really feel that there's a real need to bring in experts from other areas of government where they deal with high volume financial transactions, things like taxes, etc. They're used to dealing with this kind of volume and to be able to process it efficiently. Number two, we think in the backlog, if the government behaved its way into that backlog, Creason, and that has created serious harms for kids, they should just approve those cases. It's the harm, if any, should come to Canada, not to children, and start fresh on a new slate with better procedures, better management to ensure that this type of thing doesn't happen again.
Cindy, we also have Jordan's principal caseworkers talking about how, people from the northern and those isolated communities in northern Manitoba, take for example, they're coming down to the city for health services, and the chiefs and the reserves are having to pay the bill. There's also children and families without meals or having to, cut meals in half just to keep going to stay in that city. What does that say to the state of Jordan's principle right now?
It means that the breaches by the government of Canada are severe and unacceptable and having the most tragic impacts on children. We know that, for example, Creason, in 2024, there were at least 3 children who died in ways that were related to Canada's breaches of those legal orders. All the rest of us have to follow the law and meet basic human rights obligations. The Canadian government should be doing the same thing.
Yeah. And finally, Cindy, what is your message to the AFN and other regional chiefs to try and address this issue?
Well, we look forward to working with them to be able to enforce these legal orders on the government of Canada, take all legal measures that are possible to be able to do that. And in fact, we're going to start next week with mediation that is court ordered by the tribunal. And we'll see if we can get some of this stuff sorted out. But if not, then Canada will be held accountable legally.
That's Cindy Blackstock. She's the Executive Director with the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Cindy, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris, and Happy New Year.
Team Canada has been knocked out in the quarterfinals of the World Juniors for the 2nd straight year, and they lost in dramatic fashion.
By Stancil. Now Pinelli a chance. Rebound. Look at the score!
Despite an impressive rally in the 3rd period, Team Canada falls short in a stunning upset by Czechia in the quarterfinals at the World Juniors. With 2025, we are still taking a look back on the year that was, this time in Manitoba. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now to take a look back at 2024 in Manitoba. The calls to search the landfill dominated much of the year's headlines, and Manitobans experienced the profound loss of some prominent Indigenous leaders. Here's T.R. Wheatley with the roundup and a warning. Some of the stories here are a little heavy. Please watch with care.
In January, Cambria Harris, daughter of Morgan Harris, one of 4 women killed by a serial killer, filed a human rights complaint against the PC and NDP government in Manitoba. Morgan's remains are believed to have ended up in the Prairie Green landfill. The complaint focuses on the Manitoba election at the center of the Conservative campaign. Do not search the landfill, saying it was not feasible. In February, Ryan Manaway-Kezik made headlines after he killed his partner Amanda Clearwater, their 3 kids Bethany, Javen, and Isabella, and his partner's niece Maya Grattan. Manaway-Kezik had a history of abusing drugs and alcohol. At one point, he was told by a judge to get his methamphetamine addiction under control. Manaway-Kezik is still awaiting his trial date. Big news came in March for the families of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron after a year of fighting to search the landfill for the remains of 2 women from Long Plain First Nation.
And it's going to be survivor and family-led going forward.
$40 million was announced for searching Prairie Green, with both the feds and the province committing half each. Rebecca Contois, Harris, and Myron, along with the still unidentified person given the name Mashkode Bijike Ikwe, or Buffalo Woman, were all killed by Jeremy Skibitsky in 2022. Also in March, a historic victory for some of the most vulnerable in Manitoba, a $530 million settlement from the province for children in the child welfare system over misappropriation of special allowances over a 14-year period. The settlement affecting roughly 30,000 kids in care between 2004 and 2019. Each could receive tens of thousands of dollars in compensation.
We were adamant that every cent has to go back to these kids.
And it was this past spring, Premier Wab Kinew went viral after a photo of him changing a tire was posted online. That picture turned into internet memes. From Kinew picking berries to making an Indian taco to gutting a moose and even milking a cow.
Makes you stay humble, right? Like, you're never going to be accused of acting too good.
The Premier even joined in on the laughs with his staff and family. May saw the start of the trial of serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky for Contois, Harris, Myron, and Buffalo Woman. He originally pleaded not guilty, but the day before the trial started, his lawyer switched to not criminally responsible due to mental illness. The trial went until mid-June with over a dozen witnesses, including neighbors, police officers, homeless shelter staff, and a psychiatrist for the Crown. Meanwhile, defense had a psychiatrist as their lone witness. As well, in June, the Manitoba NDP announced for the first time its plans for searching the landfill. It would roll out as a 5-phase approach and explained all the work that needed to be done even before a physical search could begin, including removing waste from above the target area and building a semi-permanent structure that would withstand all weather conditions. Then, on July 11, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal gave an oral verdict. Skibitsky was guilty of first-degree murder ×4. And Joyal later gave his written decision on August 28 after families and Manitobans alike had time to do victim impact statements. He would get life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years to be served concurrent, Joyal saying it's the maximum sentence he can give under Canadian law.
It's now or never.
This past summer, the iconic Métis musician Ray St. Germain passed away at 83 years old. His wife Glory shared the news in late June, saying St. Germain had been dealing with Parkinson's disease. Just weeks before he passed, he was honored with the renaming of his childhood street. The summer also saw the first ever Miss Indigenous pageant take place with 26 Indigenous women competing for the crown. While the pageant was held in Six Nations, Ontario, the winner, Jessica McKenzie, is a member of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. The 30-year-old planned to use her platform to strengthen community ties. In September, Manitoba was hit with the death of Grand Chief Kathy Merrick of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. Merrick collapsed on the steps of the courthouse as she was speaking to media about a court verdict, community saying she fought to her last breath for the people. Amongst her years of advocacy, Merrick was most known for her work near the end of her life, where she pushed to get the landfill search. Merrick was also honored with a day to lay in state, where thousands of people attended before she was taken home to Pimicikamak Cree Nation for a traditional burial. In October, 11 First Nations in northern Manitoba were amongst the first to start sounding the alarm about the backlog of Jordan's principal cases in the hands of the federal government. The Keewatin Tribal Council said at the time they had to bridge finance over $8 million, taking away from other critical services. They said Manitoba had some of the highest numbers of cases pending. November saw the passing of Justice Murray Sinclair at 73 years old. Sinclair was most known for leading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He was the first Indigenous person called to the bench in Manitoba. He also co-chaired the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry that focused on racism within policing and the justice system. Over his years of service, he had dozens of accolades, including an Order of Canada. While Sinclair was buried in a traditional Medewan funeral privately, there was a public memorial held in Winnipeg where the Prime Minister, Governor General, and many prominent Indigenous leaders attended.
But you look at pride, he brought pride back to our people without anybody realizing.
Also in November, Jason Kennedy from Bloodvein First Nation spoke out about a medical procedure that left him with the wrong leg amputated.
I was devastated. I was heartbroken.
The 48-year-old diabetic had surgery at Grace Hospital in late October after his right foot was in pain and bleeding. Medical staff told him he needed amputation due to a bone infection. But when he woke from surgery, the left leg was gone. A critical incident review is underway by the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. In a statement, Manitoba's health minister said a review is investigating whether racial bias played a role. And in December, the physical search of the Prairie Green landfill began 2 years after the Harris and Myron families received devastating news their loved ones ended up there. The project's lead remained hopeful that they are in the right area as they have uncovered items with dates showing May 2022. The families were involved in the process, including choosing those on the front lines of the search. In total, there are 3 teams of 12 searchers that rotate shift work 6 days a week. Meanwhile, another daughter of Harris, Elle Harris, along with 2 other Indigenous women, filed a separate human rights complaint, this time saying the city of Winnipeg discriminated against the women when they chose not to search the landfill. The complaint has 18 reference points the city ignored. And that's the kind of year it's been for 2024 here in Manitoba. Thank you for welcoming APTN News into your lives. For many of you, it's during some of your tougher times. We are privileged to share your stories. Gananaskamitin. TR Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We have Tina House up next to look back at the year of 2024 in BC. We'll be back in less than 3 minutes. Stick around. Halifax 0, Charlottetown -3. Nuujjuak -3, La Grande River -4. Montreal -5, Quebec City -8. Ottawa -6 in Sun, Peterborough -4. Big Trout Lake -25, Sioux Lookout -21. Churchill -29, Puckatawagan -31 in Sun. -26 in Princess Harbor, Gimli -22. Regina -31, Saskatoon -30. -29 in Uranium City, Buffalo Narrows -35. High Level -23, Fort Chipewyan -23 as well. -19 in Edmonton, Lethbridge -14. Tofino 7, Cabell River 7. Sandspit 6, Prince Rupert 3. Old Crow A Burr -36, Rock River -29. Yellowknife -28, Wrigley -32. Sax Harbor -25, Polituck -26. -32 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield -27. And Iqaluit -30, Iqaluit 0. 2024 was quite a year in British Columbia. It included the ongoing drug epidemic, more calls from MMIWG advocates, and the sudden loss of an ally for Indigenous people. Our video journalist Tina House takes a look back at some of the stories that kept her busy.
The opioid epidemic continues to take countless lives and destroy families. On June the 22nd, 2019, Glenn Rebick was just 29 years old when he went to downtown Vancouver to meet some friends and use what he thought was cocaine, but unknowingly it was laced with fentanyl. He died using alone. His mother, Meredith Dan, struggles with his loss every day.
Every time, with every update, with everything that's gone through in the 4.5 years with this battle, I keep getting brought back in a time warp, back to the moment that I found out, first of all, Glenn is dead. And it's taken that time. It's taken so much time for me to try to heal, because getting pulled back to that moment, I take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But now that this is over, I'm hoping after 4.5 years, I'll be able to start moving forward the way that Glenn would want and expect me to, instead of just being sad all the time.
This countdown clock has been running on her phone since Glenn died. It's a constant reminder of that terrible day her life was torn apart.
This opioid crisis, the severity of that fentanyl that it has and how strong it is and how it's killing so many people really needs to be addressed and understood, that it could happen to anyone.
And the clock is ticking as officials are still scrambling to find solutions to this crisis. In 2016, an opioid epidemic was declared in Canada. Since then, it has taken the lives of over 38,000 people nationwide and counting. Over 10,000 people marched along the streets of the downtown east side of Vancouver, stopping along the way where many were found murdered or disappeared from.
This march began with the brutal killing of Cheryl Ann Joe in 1992 as a way to honor her memory and to make visible her killing, and a way for families to grieve.
Since her killing, and obviously before as well, there's been many women that have been killed down here and are still continued to be missing. You knew many of those women. Can you tell me about a few of them?
Well, one of the things that we started to see after the killing of Cheryl Ann Joe was an increase in missing and murdered women here from this neighborhood. And so we know that there were at least 3 serial killers that were operating in this neighborhood through the 1990s. And that one of them, we know, has got a bit more attention. But there were at least three serial killers at the time. So the march has been really important way to make visible, but also to mourn and to seek justice. And it's been a vital way for community to organize.
It all began in 2002 when police arrived at the farm belonging to the Picton family in Port Coquitlam with a warrant to search for firearms. Officers stumbled upon discarded women's clothing and personal items strewn about the property. That's when one of the largest investigations in Canadian history began. Robert Picton was charged in the deaths of 26 women, but only went to trial for 6. He was found guilty of second-degree murder. A candlelight vigil was held at the former property, where so many women lost their lives. The event is also meant to raise awareness about what they call a serious flaw in the judicial system. Lorelei Williams' cousin Tanya Holick's DNA was found on the property. Picton never went to trial for her murder, but Williams organized this event and was visibly emotional when speaking.
This is what we have to live with, and the fact that he can apply just shows how much they don't care for us.
Robert Willie Picton was eligible for day parole in February of 2024, but on May 31st, 2024, Picton died from injuries he sustained from an attack by another inmate while in maximum security prison. In September, the national organization overseeing doctors in Canada is seeking forgiveness at a ceremony in downtown Victoria.
The racism and discrimination that Indigenous peoples and healthcare providers face is deplorable, and we are deeply ashamed. As the national voice of the medical profession, we are sorry for the actions and the inactions of physicians, residents, and medical students that have harmed Indigenous peoples.
Known as the People's Premier, John Horgan was undoubtedly one of the most popular premiers in British Columbia's history. He served as premier for the New Democratic Party from 2014 to 2022, when he stepped down after announcing he had cancer. He is the only premier to be elected twice in BC. During his time in office, one of his major accomplishments was to be the first province in Canada to bring in the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People into law.
It has truly been the honor of my lifetime to be the Premier of British Columbia, and I want to thank all of you for your very generous applause, and to all British Columbians, thank you for your service to a better world for all of us. It has been a tremendous ride.
John Joseph Horgan lost his battle with cancer on November the 12th, 2024, but his legacy will live on. Tansei, on behalf of everybody at APTN National News' BC Bureau, we want to wish you a very happy holidays. I'm Tina House, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Tina. And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday, January 3rd. We're back with more stories for your evening newscast. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Ekse.